Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I'm back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at @fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, what type of protein powder should I be using? There are so many to choose from, and I have no clue what works and what doesn't. So, generally speaking, when it comes to protein powders, I recommend a good whey isolate for those people who are a little bit sensitive to dairy, as in lactose intolerant, or just overall have a hard time digesting dairy as a whole. Just because you have a trouble digesting dairy doesn't necessarily mean you're lactose intolerant. However, when you have problems with your digestive tract, whenever you have something like cheese, you have something like milk, you have something like yogurt, and you start to notice that your stomach is giving you some issues, maybe it's painful, maybe you have bloating, gas, there is a fairly good chance that you're lactose intolerant. Okay, and there's different degrees of lactose intolerance. So for people like that, I do recommend a good whey isolate protein powder because there's no dairy in it whatsoever. If you're like me though, and you're not lactose intolerant, as long as it's a solid whey protein powder, you should be okay. And when I say a solid whey protein powder, I mean something like a whey concentrate protein powder. Okay. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a whey isolate. It can have some dairy. Dairy is not necessarily bad, especially if you're not lactose intolerant. But ideally, if you are someone who has a hard time digesting dairy, I do recommend that whey isolate. But if you're someone who, I'm fine with dairy, I can consume dairy, I don't get gas, I don't get bloating, no upset stomach, then I say a basic whey concentrate, which is also a little bit more cost effective as well. Now, if you are going to go for a whey concentrate, my recommendation is look for a product that has no more than 2 grams of sugar per serving and no less than 25 grams of protein per serving. So it should have anywhere from 25 grams to 30 grams of protein per scoop and no more than 2 grams of sugar per scoop, no more than 2 grams of carbs per scoop. Okay. As far as fat, there really shouldn't be any fat in a whey protein powder. I mean, you might get 1 or 2 grams, but that's nothing. And it's usually good fat. So you just want to make sure that you're watching your sugar intake and your carb intake because there's a lot of whey concentrate powders on the market now that are really high in sugar and really high in carbs and really low in protein. Those are low quality protein powders, okay? And there's quite a few out there. So it's important that you know how to read the nutritional labels. If you're going to pick a whey isolate, you really can't go wrong. Most whey isolates are great. They're a little bit more expensive, but you're paying for that no dairy, pure whey isolate protein powder. So that's what you're paying for. Okay. But again, if you're not lactose intolerant or you have no problem digesting dairy, a good whey concentrate, more cost effective, and it'll work just as well. All right. Okay. Nick, I've been training really hard since Christmas and have not seen any changes in my body. I feel like I'm just wasting my time in the gym. I train 5 days a week and do around 80 minutes of weights and 45 minutes of cardio. Any help you can provide would be appreciated. It sounds to me like you're doing too much. Okay, now I don't want to say that you're overtraining, but it sounds like you're overtaxing the body, overtaxing the central nervous system. And the reality is, if you're spending over 2 hours in the gym, you're most likely not training with the utmost amount of intensity. And that's the most important thing. I've talked about in the past how my own workouts, 45, 50 minutes max. My clients' workouts, 45 minutes, 60 minutes max. Okay. When you're training hard, as in nonstop, balls to wall, lifting heavy weight, very low rest periods, not playing on your phone, you shouldn't want to be in the gym for longer than 45, 50 minutes, right? So, in my opinion, if you're in the gym this long, you're doing too much and you're probably not training with the utmost amount of intensity. Now, because I don't work with you, I don't know what your workouts look like, but looking at how much time you're training with weights, 80 minutes, and then on top of that, another 45 minutes, you're in the gym for over 2 hours. That to me is too much. Okay, so I would scale that back. I would focus more on the weights, less on the cardio. If your goal is to build muscle and your body fat levels are low or relatively low, you want to make sure that you're using most of your time in the gym for the weights, okay, not the cardio. And if you're training with the utmost amount of intensity, you're also going to get a cardio workout because you're not resting as long in between sets. Every single workout I do, whether I'm training legs or arms, back, chest, I'm drenched in sweat at the end of my workout because I'm not resting long. Okay. So if you're taking too long of rest periods in between sets, you're not going to get results because in order to build muscle, you need to make sure that you're hitting that muscle when it's not fully recovered. If you do a set of, let's say, bench press and you knock out 10, 12 reps, you're bench pressing 225, and then you rest for 5 minutes and go back and do it again, you're hitting a muscle that's fully recovered. So you might get a little bit stronger, but you're not going to really build or sculpt your muscle. It won't happen. So you have to make sure you hit that muscle when it's about 60 to 70% recovered. And that's the whole idea behind hypertrophy. So your muscles are forced to recruit more muscle fibers to produce more muscle fibers in order to grow. So you want to make sure that you're keeping those rest periods low, as in 45 seconds to maybe 90 seconds max, but no longer than that. So that's my recommendation. Scale your time back in the gym. Take down that cardio, maybe take it out altogether. Again, I don't work with you online or I don't work with you in person, so I'm not too sure what you look like. You can always contact me, send me some photos, and I'll give you an idea as to what I would do as far as your cardio and resistance training is concerned. But in my opinion, that's too much time in the gym. And if you are spending that much time in the gym, something tells me that you're not training with the utmost amount of intensity, which is crucial if you truly want to maximize your results. All right. Nick, if I don't train my legs, will it stop me from getting a bigger upper body? I've heard you say this as well as other coaches, but would like to know why this is. Yeah, it's a good question. So my theory behind this is that when you train your legs, legs is a are, let's I should say, legs are a big muscle group. Okay. When you train a big muscle group, you have to exert a lot of energy. If you exert a lot of energy, you're also going to exert a lot of testosterone. You're going to exert a lot of calories. So it's going to help you build and replenish your body as a whole because whether you're a man or a woman, greater testosterone levels are going to increase muscle mass, lean muscle mass. Okay, so this is important when it comes to building muscle. So you're making a mistake by not training your legs because I truly do believe that people that don't train their legs, and it's usually men because women do usually train their legs, but men, they're missing out on a physique that they could really excel as far as building a foundation, building maybe bigger biceps, more detailed deltoids, a more predominant chest, a wider back, because they're neglecting a muscle group that you have to increase testosterone to train it. Your body's going to be forced to increase the testosterone levels in your body because you're exerting so much force, exerting so much energy into that leg workout. So I think it's a big mistake for guys not to train their legs. And not just for that reason, but you also don't want to have somewhat of a bigger upper body because yes, if you are training your upper body only, of course you're going to get a bigger upper body, but you're going to have these ridiculous little stick legs. So you don't want to create muscular imbalances, never mind for the aesthetics reason, but also you want to prevent injuries. Okay, so if you have this big upper body full of muscle and these little stick twig legs, you're putting a lot of pressure and weight on your hip abductors, your hip flexors, your patella, your knees, your ankles, these issues. So for those reasons, I'd recommend training your legs at least once a week. So I hope that kind of makes sense is that, if you really think about it, when you train a big muscle group, let's say it's back. I know when I train back, I have to really exert a lot of energy and I'm just gassed after a back workout. Like when I train chest and arms, yeah, they're hard workouts, but nothing compares to a back or leg workout. Absolutely not. And it's because they're bigger muscle groups. So when you're training bigger muscle groups, you exert more energy. And when you do exert that more energy, you're forcing your body to grow. You're forcing more muscle fibers into the system. You're forcing that hypertrophy to take place, and you're forcing your body to produce more testosterone, which is necessary when it comes to building muscle. So again, if you're not training your legs at least once a week, you're making a big mistake because you're missing out on all kinds of greater results when it comes to building muscle mass. And I say lean muscle mass on your upper body. All right. Okay. Nick, I think my cheat meals are sabotaging my results. I know you say that they are necessary to have, but would it affect my results negatively if I took them out of my diet completely? So I've actually never said that cheat meals are necessary to have. I myself don't have cheat meals. I haven't had cheat meals in over 5 years. If I have a meal when I'm out at a restaurant, I guess you could consider that a cheat meal, but it's not scheduled, it's not planned, and it's very sporadic, as in maybe once or twice a month. Okay. I like to stick to my diet. And I have a lot of people I work with online who also like to stick to their diet. They don't want to have outside food. They don't want to have pizza, burgers, fries, spaghetti, all that crap. There are other people that like to have that, and they like to reward themselves with that one meal a week or two meals a week, depending on what their plan looks like and what their goal is. Okay. So also, cheat meals give a lot of people that sense of normalcy that they can go out for a few drinks, they can have like go to a barbecue, whatever it is. So it does give you a little bit more flexibility in your diet. So that's why I implement cheat meals into people's plans. But a cheat meal doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something dirty. Okay, it doesn't have to be junk food. If you like salmon and salmon's already on your diet, have more salmon for that one cheat meal. Same thing. I tell people I have a lot of clients who like peanut butter. I say, well, you know what? Once a week, have an extra 2 or 3 tablespoons of peanut butter in your oatmeal. Go for it. So it's not necessarily trying to have dirty food. It's just trying to reboot your body, reset your body, give yourself a little bit more calories, especially if you are following a pretty strict nutritional plan. Like if I'm working with someone who's competing for a bodybuilding show, they're on a diet that's pretty strict. They're pretty regiment with their meals. They're usually given 5 or 6 meals a day. I'm watching their carbohydrates, their fats, their proteins. So that regimen, it can take a toll on your body, both physically and mentally, day in, day out. So sometimes those additional calories help kind of reboot and reset your body. But again, it doesn't have to be a burger. It doesn't have to be ice cream. It can be, like I said, it could be more salmon, it could be more chicken breast, it could be maybe more rice, whatever you want, but just get in those additional calories just to reset your body and just let your body just rest for a bit, get some nutrients in there, some additional nutrients, and watch, it'll help your body grow, it'll help your body recover. So, my definition of a cheat meal is not something that's just junk food. And I have a lot of people on my roster who don't touch junk food. They won't because they know, like you, it sabotages their results, whether it's mentally or physically. Some people, they can't do it because they physically get sick from having that food. I'm like that. If I go out right now and have a pizza, I'm going to be so sick because my diet is so clean. I'm not used to that food. It's going to be like someone who doesn't drink and all of a sudden they go out and they have 3 or 4 drinks. They're probably going to be pretty hungover the next day. Whereas someone who drinks on a weekly basis or even a daily basis, they're not going to really feel the effects as much, right? Because their body is so used to having alcohol in it. So, and it's the same thing with people who have dirty food or junk food on a regular basis. Their bodies are so used to having that food in them. I use that analogy if you have a really clean house and someone comes in and messes up that house. Now the house is in disarray. It's the same thing with your body. If you're someone who's dialed in your diet and you're eating clean food on a daily basis, and all of a sudden you throw in some bad food and you have an upset stomach, maybe you have diarrhea, you have gas, whatever it is, you feel very lethargic, someone's messed up your house. Okay. So if you don't feel like a cheat meal is helping you in any way, my recommendation, don't have it. But I would recommend having a little bit more calories on one meal or two meals a week. Okay. Just to reset your body a little bit. Okay. And like I said, that can be more rice, it could be more chicken, it could be more salmon, whatever I'm not working with you, so I don't know what your diet looks like, but more of the good food. And you'll notice that it actually does help reset your body. It really does. So I'm a firm believer in giving myself a little bit of additional calories for 1 or 2 meals a week. It helps replenish glycogen storages. I usually advise people to do it on a muscle group, I should say, on a muscle group that they're training that day. That's a big muscle group, so like a leg day or a back day, because they're exerting more energy, exerting more calories. And I always recommend people have their cheat meal towards the end of the day as opposed to the beginning of the day. And I've talked about this in the past because sometimes what happens when people do have a cheat meal, let's say for brunch, they might go restaurant, have pancakes, syrup, whatever. They're craving more of that junk food for the rest of their day because they've spiked their insulin levels and their blood sugar levels have dropped. So now they're craving more sugar, more simple carbohydrates, more saturated fats. So that's why I recommend have your cheat meal at the end of the day if you are going to have a dirty cheat meal, because then you just go to bed and you wake up the next day and you forget about it and start fresh on the diet again. Okay. So if you're going to have a dirty cheat meal, my recommendation is save it for the end of the day. If you're going to have a clean cheat meal, have it any time of the day. Do it once or twice a week, depending on what your goal is, where you're at. on your fitness journey, whatever you want to call it. But wherever you are with your results, that's how you implement your meal. And again, it doesn't have to be a dirty meal. Just get in those additional calories. It does work and it does help replenish glycogen storages. All right. Okay. Nick, how do you recommend people bulk if they want to add on size? Is a dirty bulk more effective than a clean bulk? Okay, so when it comes to bulking, and if you follow me on Instagram or watch the YouTube channel or have worked with me in-house or online, you know that I hate that term bulking because I feel that most people bulk incorrectly. They go under that seafood diet. You see food and you eat it. And most people, when they're trying to bulk, they put on more fat and more water than actual muscle. Your body doesn't need to be in a surplus of calories in order to build muscle. That is a huge misconception. And I talked about that briefly last week on the Q&A. Just like your body doesn't need to be in a severe caloric deficit in order to lose body fat. Okay. In fact, if your body goes into too far of a severe caloric deficit, you're going to lose muscle, water, and body fat, but predominantly muscle and water. So same thing if you go into too extreme of a caloric surplus, you're going to put on fat, you're going to put on water. You might put on a little bit of muscle because if you're taking in that many calories, your strength should go up in the gym, but at what cost to put on that fat and water? If you have a layer of fat covering that muscle, you're never going to see it. So what I try to do with my clients who I call hard gainers, as in they have very fast metabolisms, I slowly increase their calories. Okay. Very slowly though, as in I might increase their carbohydrates by maybe like 20 grams a day a week. So every week I change your diet and say, okay, I want you to have 20 more grams each day for the next week. That's not very much. Okay. Sometimes I'll increase their fat. Sometimes I'll increase their protein. It really depends on the individual I'm working with and where we're at with their nutritional plan. Same thing I do when I'm working with someone who's trying to lose weight. I don't just start cutting calories like crazy and giving them hours of cardio. I do it very slowly because if you do it slowly, you're going to maintain and sustain those results. If you do it quickly, as in the extreme route, which you see people do with these fad diets, you're going to gain a bunch of weight, but it's not going to be quality weight. Same thing. If you go into a caloric deficit, you're going to go lose a bunch of weight, but it's not going to be quality weight. So in order to build solid, lean, dense muscle, you need to implement a strategy that makes sense. So what you need to do is you need to look at your diet as a whole and say, okay, how much complex carbohydrates am I gaining? How much healthy fats am I gaining? How much lean proteins am I gaining? Now, what do I need to increase in order to get from point A to point B? If you're not well versed with dietary nutrition, I do recommend working with a coach, okay? Because someone who's at least well versed when it comes to building muscle with nutrition, that could be a dietitian, nutritionist, personal trainer, can help you get those results in a more quickly and timely fashion as you just kind of doing it on your own and guessing, okay, or following a TikTok influencer. Okay, you want to work with someone who knows the science behind the dietary nutrition with the training. So my recommendation when you're trying to bulk or add on weight, you need to get that mindset going of I only want to add on muscle. I don't want to add on fat. And I don't want to add on water. I mean, you're going to add on some water weight, of course, because if you're increasing your carbohydrates, your body's going to hold water. But you don't want all the weight to be water and fat. So in order to keep the fat low and keep the muscle building high, you need to do it slowly. And like I said, you have to pull from your complex carbs, your healthy fats, your lean proteins. What I typically do with clients, I rotate my macronutrients on a weekly basis. And I've talked about this in the past about when I work with people online, whether it's helping them gain weight or lose weight, I'm a firm believer in macronutrient rotation because it works. I did it when I used to compete. I do it with clients who compete. I do it with clients who just want to look and feel better. It works. Okay. But you have to really be strategic and you have to implement a strategy that's going to work for your physique, your genetics, your lifestyle, your training program. But you can do it. But you have to get that mindset of dirty bulk out of your head. Even the clean bulk, you have to get that out of your head because anytime you go into too much of a caloric surplus, whether it's clean food or dirty food, you're going to put on unwanted weight. So in order to put on solid lean muscle, you need to make sure that the calories that you're increasing come from complex carbohydrates, healthy fats, and lean proteins. And you don't want to be increasing all three on a weekly basis. You want to rotate accordingly based on your current body weight, based on your activity level, training program, genetics, etc. All right. Okay, Nick, how important do you think sleep is for building muscle? I get about 5 to 6 hours a night, but I've been reading that I should be getting more in order to grow. If you asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have said that sleep is not that important. I was one of those sleep shamers. I would shame people who would sleep for 8 hours a day. And that you shouldn't sleep for 8 hours a day. I came from that mindset when Arnold Schwarzenegger used to tell people sleep faster. You don't need 8 hours a night, sleep for 6 hours a night. But then I had my grand mal seizure, and I realized the reason I had that seizure was from lack of sleep. That was the only reason I had that seizure because they did CT scans, they did MRIs, they did a EEG test, nothing. Couldn't figure out why I had that seizure. And the only thing that I could think of was I was sleeping for about 3.5, 4 hours a night max. And I did that for probably about 5 years. I'm surprised I didn't have a seizure earlier. So it's so important. And I can't sit here and tell you you need to get 8 hours a night because I don't believe that everyone does need to get 8 hours a night. For me, now I get 6 hours a night. That's enough for me. I don't need more than that. I can't force my body to sleep more than that. If I go to bed at 10, I'll sleep 6 hours and I'm up. If I go to bed at 11, I'll sleep 6 hours and I'm up. But I make sure that when I sleep, there's a few things I like to do to make sure that when I go to bed, I fall asleep right away. One is to limit caffeine intake throughout the day. I never have caffeine after 2 p.m. ever. So that means even if I'm working out at night, I don't have my pre-workout, I don't have an espresso, I have no caffeine whatsoever because that's going to affect my quality of sleep. It's going to stop me from falling asleep. I'm not going to allow my body to get into a good REM sleep. Okay. Another thing I like to do is I don't like to eat too close to when I go to sleep because I find that if my stomach is full, it does affect my sleep because my body's trying to digest that food. So I try to limit my food intake and try to cut it off. If I go to bed at 10, I'll usually stop my last meal around 7. So my body has a good 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours to digest that food, and then I go to sleep. Okay. It's so important. And I'm no longer a sleep shamer. So when I have someone tell me that they need 8 hours, I'm like, okay, you need 8 hours. You know your body. Um, there's people out there who sleep for 10 hours. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and tell someone how much sleep they need or they don't need, but I can tell you from working with the general population, most people function best on 6 to 8 hours of sleep. And I don't just mean they're more productive at work, but their workouts are more productive as well. Their performance in the gym is much better when they get at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Okay. So it's really an individually based question. Teenagers usually need more sleep than adults, right? And then I have a lot of clients that as they get older, like into their late 60s, early 70s, they actually require less sleep. These people are sleeping for 5 or 6 hours a night and they feel fine and they get all their blood work done. They go for regular physical checkups and they're fine. So everyone's different, but it's so important for recovery. And it's something that's probably until I was in my early 30s, I used to shame people for, and I don't anymore because I've seen what can happen when you don't get enough sleep. So take it from someone who's had a seizure, grand mal seizure, caused, in my opinion, and also my neurologist's opinion, directly from lack of sleep. You need it. My recommendation, get a minimum of 6 hours a night. If you can, try to get that 7 or 8, because that does seem to work well for most people. And really try to make sure, more importantly, not necessarily the duration of the sleep, but the quality of your sleep. So if you're only sleeping for 5 or 6 hours, but it's a good quality sleep and you get yourself into a good REM sleep, that's more effective than sleeping for 8 to 10 hours and you're never in a good quality sleep. You keep waking up, you're tossing and turning. That's not good. So implement those strategies I talked about. Limit your caffeine to intake. Cut it off. If my recommendation with caffeine, try to cut caffeine 8 to 10 hours before you go to sleep. This works really well. Okay. Another thing too is make sure that you don't eat too close to bedtime, because again, if your body's digesting food, it's very hard to fall asleep. Okay. And you will notice that if you get a good quality night's sleep, that not only mentally do you feel more alert, but physically your performance in the gym excels. So sleep is very important. I would say sleep is just as important as diet, training, supplementation. It's up there. All right. Okay. Nick, are big arms genetic, or can anyone get them if they train them heavy and with a lot of volume? My arms suck and I want to bring them up at least 3 or 4 inches, but they won't grow. Okay, so everything's genetics, right? So you can take someone who's got great genetics, superior genetics, and if they've got a great work ethic, when you combine a great work ethic with great genetics, you've got an unbeatable combination. Okay, you've got a Michael Jordan, you've got a Ronnie Coleman, right? So you look at those guys and say, okay, they're genetic freaks. But if you're not a genetic freak, you can still achieve good results. Can you achieve their results? No, probably not. Okay, but you can achieve good results. So you just have to think outside the box. And if you are someone who naturally has small arms or you struggle building your arms, my recommendation to you, train them less often. I know it sounds silly, but if you train a muscle group more, it's not going to grow. You want to train it less. And don't forget, when you train your arms, or when you train, let's say, your back, your chest, your shoulders, you're training your arms indirectly. Whenever I do a bench press, my tricep is a synergist muscle. Whenever I do a row, my bicep is a synergist muscle. So your arms get worked indirectly when you do a chest workout, when you do a shoulder workout, when you do a back workout, they get worked indirectly. So when it comes to doing an arm workout, you don't need to spend an hour or 2 hours in the gym training arms. When I do my arms, and my arms are fairly big, I never train them longer than 45 minutes. They're usually 40 minutes. It's the easiest workout of the week for me because I'm not exerting as much energy because they're a smaller muscle group. It's still a hard workout, but it's the easier of the five workouts I do. Um, my recommendation, if you are struggling to bring up your arms, superset them. Supersetting arms works great. Okay, so you superset your biceps with your triceps, incorporate drop sets. That's another great way to bring up your arms. So if you're doing your last set of, let's say, tricep rope cable extensions, and you get 10 to 12 reps, drop that weight in half and do it one more time, no rest in between. So take that muscle to true failure. It's that analogy I use. If you have a wet towel, wring out that towel so you know you're working those muscles to true failure. Okay, you're fully exerting yourself on every single exercise you do, especially on your last set of an exercise. So for people who struggle with their arms, my recommendation is put them on their own day. So don't train them with your back, don't train them with your chest, put them on your own day, on their own day. So you prioritize them, superset them. So you're hitting front and back, back and forth. Keep the volume, 4 sets per exercise, keep the reps between 10 to 12. That seems to work best for most people. Don't do these like 3 or 4 reps. And lastly, throw in drop sets. Drop sets work exceptionally well, especially if you're really trying to bring in more detail and sculpt those muscle bellies. All right. Okay. Okay. Two more questions. Nick, sorry, Nick, do steroids work even if you don't train? Like, can a person still build muscle if they're on a steroid cycle, but are not training at all with weights? There are people who I know who I've come up with training in gyms who take steroids that you would never know that they take steroids because their training intensity sucks. I've watched them. They spend most of the time on their phone and they're on these massive steroid cycles. And then you look at the top level bodybuilders and everyone goes, oh, steroids, steroids. I'm like, yeah, some of them are, well, the top level, all of them are on steroids, but a lot of them, the steroid cycles are not nearly as big as the general public think. Again, these guys are genetic freaks, but a lot of them work their ass off to get where they are. So it's not necessarily the drugs that make the champion. Okay. It's not necessarily the drugs that build the physique. It's the drugs with the combination of a good diet and a great work ethic. Okay. So to answer that question, if you take steroids and you're not lifting weights, you're probably going to get bigger because steroids help build muscle. But because you're not training with weights, you're not really going to see any noticeable changes as far as muscle definition, muscle density. You might just notice a bigger physique because when you are taking steroids, your body's also going to retain additional fluid. So I wouldn't recommend anyone take steroids to begin with unless you are trying to compete at that elite level, as in get your IFBB Pro card. Again, if you're not training to be a bodybuilder at a professional competition, I don't see why anyone would take steroids personally. But if you're not even going to go to the gym, it makes zero sense to use steroids. So to answer that question, you're going to get bigger for sure because, and again, it depends on the steroids you're using. Like, I mean, if you're using growth hormone, well, of course, you're going to get bigger. You're going to even get leaner. And you don't have to go to the gym, but it's not going to be quality muscle. It's going to be kind of like weird looking muscle because you're just going to kind of look big but you're not going to look defined because you're not sculpting the muscles. When you go into the gym and you're training, if you're following a bodybuilding split, I always think of it like your body's a canvas and you're adding onto that canvas. You're creating a piece of art. So you're sculpting your muscles with different angles. And again, incorporating, like I talked about, the drop sets, the supersets, the circuit training, using different planes and ranges of motion. All this is necessary if you want to build a great looking physique. You can't just inject your butt with a needle 2 or 3 times a week and think that's going to happen. It's not. Like I said, you will get bigger. If you're taking growth hormone, you probably will even get a little bit leaner. But you're not going to have the physique that you're thinking you're going to have because you're not sculpting it in any way, right? So to me, that's useless. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. And I honestly don't recommend anyone go on a steroid cycle unless, of course, you are trying to make it to that top competitive level of the IFBB. Um, and in that case, my recommendation again is work with a reputable and knowledgeable coach that can guide you safely and not put your health at risk. Because remember, taking steroids, you are always taking a risk with your health whenever you go on a steroid cycle. All right, last question. Nick, in your opinion, what is the reason why people stop training? Has a client ever given you a reason if they stop working out with you? Okay, so I mean, there's a few reasons why people stop training, right? I have a lot of people I personally don't have a lot of people that stop training with me. I'm very, very lucky. I've had people train with me both in-house and on the floor for 20 plus years. Very rarely do I have a client leave. And if they do, they usually come back after a few months. So I'm very fortunate, but I understand that I'm not the I want to say that in my industry, it's very common for clients to leave their trainers after some time. So I think when it comes to leaving the trainers, it could be financially. Maybe they're not in a financially good place at the time where they can afford personal training, or it could be work related. So maybe that they have greater demands when it comes to work. It could be family related. Maybe they have more responsibilities now with their family. Could be mental burnout, could be physical burnout, as in someone's had an injury or a physical limitation that limits them from going to the gym. So there's multiple reasons. And again, in my experience, whenever I've had someone tell me I need to take a break, it's usually due to something going on with work. Their schedules change with them. Sometimes it's financially, and they'll say, I'll be back in a few months. I just have to take care of mortgage payments or whatever it is, school for the kids, and then they come back. But if it's your average person who just goes to the gym on their own, in my experience, it's usually lack of results. Because people who are working with good trainers, as in trainers that hold them accountable and make sure that they are trained correctly and putting together a training program for them that's going to produce results, regardless if your client's training for you twice a week or 5 times a week, if you're a good trainer, you can help someone build a physique that they want based on the amount of times a week that they're willing to put into the gym, as long as they have realistic expectations. That's important too. Because if I have someone come work with me and say, well, I can only work out once a week, well, I'm going to tell them there's only so much we can do with your physique. You're going to get stronger. You're probably going to see a little bit of muscle definition, but don't expect dramatic changes. Now, if you're in the gym with me once a week, but then you're also in the gym on your own 3 or 4 times a week following the training program I give you, you're going to see changes. So it's about the frequency that someone's going to go to the gym. But I feel like a lot of people, they don't manage their expectations accordingly, and they have unreal expectations and they set unrealistic goals and say, well, I want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the 70s, and I've never gone to the gym, but I want to look like that in 6 months. Not going to happen. Promise you it's not going to happen. No way. Because if you don't know how to train, you need to learn how to do the exercises properly first. Then and only then will you start increasing your weight. Once you start increasing your weight in the gym, training with proper form, proper technique, then comes the diet. So this is not an overnight process. This is something that takes time. So if you're managing your expectations, say, I've never gone to the gym and I'm sitting right now, if I'm a guy at 25% body fat, if I'm a girl, maybe I'm sitting at 18, 19% body fat, whatever it is, I need to give myself some time, a realistic timeline to bring my body fat down and build muscle. And depending on how out of shape you are, that should be what the timeline is you're giving yourself. Okay. So if you're someone who's maybe 10% body fat, well, okay, your body fat's pretty low. So a realistic expectation to maybe bring it down to 6%, you might be able to do that in 3 or 4 months. But someone who's never gone to the gym before, they really have to manage their expectations accordingly and set realistic goals. And I truly believe that for the average person who goes to the gym on their own without a personal trainer, they don't have realistic goals. They don't set a proper game plan. And because they don't have a strategy in place, they usually get injured or they get frustrated because they're not seeing the results. They're not seeing change. Who wants to keep going to do something if they're not seeing any results? No, it's like going to work and not making any money. Who the hell's going to do that? So same thing. You're going to the gym and you want an ROI, right? You want that return on investment. So whether that's aesthetics, maybe you are going to the gym to change your physique. Maybe that could be health related. I have a lot of people who work with me both in-house and online that they don't really care necessarily about what they look like. They really care about getting their health better. They want to bring out down their resting heart rate. They want to bring down their blood pressure. Maybe they're at risk for diabetes and they want to really get that out of the way and say, okay, well, how can I do that? It's usually through diet and exercise. So people have different reasons for going to the gym, and people have different reasons for following a clean nutritional plan. But you have to make sure that you manage your expectations and that you set realistic goals. But that, in my experience, is the usually the reason why a lot of people give up because they haven't managed their expectations and they haven't set those realistic goals. So make sure if you are someone new to the gym or you're making a comeback to the gym, set realistic goals. If you can afford to work with a trainer, even better, because that trainer will hold you accountable when you're not seeing the results. Because there will come times where you hit a plateau, even if you're working with the best of the best trainers. It does happen. But that trainer should be able to troubleshoot and get you back on track, whether it's with your diet or your training or supplementation. So in my experience, that's the reason why most people give up and stop training. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, April the 14th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, supplement protocol, training program, please feel free to contact me anytime at nick@foreverfitperformance.com. Or you can DM me on my Instagram at @fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house coaching business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support and feedback that I receive from each and every one of you. Thank you all once again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.